At a border crossing deep in the Arabian desert, a truck driver is sleeping under his trailer. He has been there for 8 days. Behind him, in the container he's paid to deliver, thousands of dollars worth of fresh flowers are rotting in the 50-degree heat. Nobody has told him why he cannot cross. Nobody will. The paperwork is fine. The cargo is legal. The border is officially open, and yet the line of trucks stretches back for kilometers, drivers cooking on portable stoves, waiting for a permission that never comes. A few hundred kilometers to the east, a businessman boards the morning flight from Riyadh to Dubai. In the overhead compartment above his seat is a bag, and inside that bag is cash. A lot of it. Not because he's a criminal, because he has no other choice. The bank transfer he sent 3 weeks ago simply vanished. Held for days, then reversed, then returned without a single word of explanation. It has been happening since May to hundreds of companies, hundreds of people. When money can no longer safely cross a border, human beings go back to doing what they did 50 years ago. They carry it by hand. Now here is what makes these scenes truly strange. These two countries are not at war. They have never fired a shot at each other. On paper, they are the closest of allies, the two richest nations in the Arab world, partners who fought wars side by side for a decade, whose armies bled in the same trenches, whose rulers once called each other brothers. More than $20 billion in trade flows between them every single year, or at least it used to. Because something has broken between Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, and it broke in a way that almost nobody outside the region noticed. In the final days of December 2025, Saudi warplanes did something they had never done before, something that didn't happen even during the worst crises the Gulf has ever lived through. They dropped bombs on a weapons shipment belonging to their own ally. Emirati weapons sitting in a Yemeni port, destroyed by Saudi jets. Within 10 days, a militia that the UAE had spent an entire decade and billions of dollars building was gone, dissolved, erased from the map, its leader fleeing into exile in Abu Dhabi. A 10-year project, wiped out in a week and a half. And ever since, the two capitals that built the modern Gulf together have been quietly strangling each other's economies. Blocked payments, frozen trucks, rejected visas. A silent war fought not with missiles, but with paperwork. This is the story of how the most successful alliance of the 21st century became its most dangerous rivalry. It is a story about a trap with no exit. Two nations that discovered, almost at the same moment, that they need the exact same future to survive. The same investors, the same tourists, the same airlines, the same technology, and that there may only be room for one of them in it. It is a story about what happens when the common enemy that held an alliance together starts to disappear, and two partners look across the table and realize, for the first time, that the biggest threat in the room is each other. And it begins with an irony almost too perfect for history. Because the smaller of these two countries once did something extraordinary. It identified, groomed, and helped install the very leadership of its giant neighbor, a kingmaker operation that reshaped the entire Middle East. It was the smartest geopolitical investment of the decade. It created its own greatest rival. No agenda, just the signal. This is beyond the noise. To understand how badly this relationship is broken, you first need to understand something uncomfortable. Just 10 years ago, these two countries were so close, so synchronized, so mutually dependent, that intelligence analysts around the world treated them as a single actor. One will, two flags. And the thing that welded them together this tightly wasn't friendship. It was fear. Picture the Gulf as it looked in the mid-2010s. Two families sit on two thrones, surrounded by what they see as a rising tide, designed to sweep monarchies like theirs into history. To the northeast, across a narrow strip of water, sits Iran, a state born from a revolution whose founding purpose was the overthrow of exactly this kind of hereditary rule. Iran's fingerprints seem to be everywhere. Militias in Iraq, Hezbollah in Lebanon, the Assad regime in Syria, and armed movements creeping closer to the Arabian Peninsula itself. For the rulers in Riyadh and Abu Dhabi, this is not an abstract rivalry over influence. It is existential. If Iran's model of revolutionary politics spreads, their families don't lose an election. They lose everything. And then, as if one mortal threat were not enough, a second one erupts from within. Beginning in 2011, the Arab Spring sets the region on fire. Presidents who had ruled for 30 years are dragged from power in weeks. Crowds fill the squares of Cairo, Tunis, Sana'a, demanding elections, accountability, an end to dynastic rule. And riding that wave comes a force the Gulf monarchies fear almost as much as Iran, the Muslim Brotherhood, a transnational movement arguing that Islam and the ballot box belong together, and that kings are not part of the equation. For two absolute monarchies, whose legitimacy rests on the idea that there is no alternative, a popular, religious, elected alternative is the most dangerous idea in the world. So the logic of the decade writes itself. Saudi Arabia and the UAE lock arms. They share intelligence. They coordinate foreign policy down to the smallest detail. They bankroll the same counter-revolutions, prop up the same generals, fund the same governments willing to crush the same Islamists. When Egypt's elected Muslim Brotherhood president is toppled by the military in 2013, money from Riyadh and Abu Dhabi floods in within days to stabilize the new regime. When war breaks out in Yemen in 2015 against the Iranian-backed Houthis, Saudi and Emirati troops deploy side by side. The first time in modern history that Gulf armies fight a sustained ground war together. And in 2017, the two of them jointly blockade their own neighbor, Qatar, by land, sea, and air, punishing it for keeping ties with Iran and for financing the political Islam they both dread. From the outside, it looks unbreakable. Western capitals begin referring to the two countries almost as one unit. Their sovereign wealth funds invest together. Their diplomats lobby together. Their air forces bomb together. Analysts coin a phrase for the partnership at the heart of it all, the axis that runs the Arab world. But here is what almost everyone missed at the time, and what explains everything that came after. This alliance was never built on shared interests. It was built on shared enemies. And those are two profoundly different foundations. Shared interests can hold two countries together for a century. Shared enemies hold them together exactly as long as the enemy remains standing, and not one day longer. Because underneath the joint operations and the brotherly embraces, the two partners were always fundamentally mismatched. One is a giant, over 2 million square kilometers, 20 million citizens, the custodian of Islam's two holiest cities, carrying the weight and the constraints of leadership over the entire Muslim world. The other is small, agile, and unburdened, a federation of city-states with barely 1 million citizens, free to move fast, take risks, and reinvent itself overnight. One was still almost entirely dependent on oil. The other had spent decades building a life after oil. One had to care what 1 billion Muslims thought of its choices. The other, quietly, did not. As long as Iranian missiles and revolutionary crowds dominated the horizon, none of these differences mattered. Fear is a powerful glue. But glue is not architecture. And in the late 2010s, cracks began to appear in the foundation, not in a summit, not in a press conference, but in the mountains and ports of the poorest country in the Arab world. The war the two allies had entered together, side by side, was about to teach them something neither wanted to learn: that they had marched into Yemen with the same enemy, but with two completely different wars in mind. And to understand why that discovery would eventually poison everything, you first have to understand the strangest chapter in this entire story. The moment when the smaller partner reached into the palace of the giant and chose who would rule it. In the entire history of modern geopolitics, there may be no stranger investment than the one the United Arab Emirates made in the year 2015. Because in 2015, one of the smallest countries in the Middle East effectively chose the ruler of one of the largest. And everything you are watching today, the bombings, the blocked payments, the collapse of the Gulf, flows from that single decision. To see how this was even possible, look at the map through Emirati eyes. The way is a thin strip of coastline wedged between two giants, Iran across the water, Saudi Arabia across the sand. A country that small, that rich, and that exposed does not survive by strength. It survives by leverage, by making bigger powers move in directions that serve Emirati interests. And in the mid-2010s, Abu Dhabi spotted the leverage opportunity of a generation sitting right next door. Saudi Arabia, for all its size and oil, had a peculiar weakness. It was a kingdom ruled by old men in sequence. For 60 years, the throne had passed not from father to son, but from brother to brother, down the long line of sons of the kingdom's founder. By 2015, that system was reaching its biological end. The new king, Salman, took the crown at 79 years old. Behind the throne, an entire generation of princes, dozens of them, began quietly maneuvering to become the real power in the kingdom. It was a succession struggle inside the world's largest oil producer. And into that struggle stepped the Wuwei. Abu Dhabi's leadership studied the field of princes and placed its bet on the most unlikely candidate imaginable: the king's seventh son. Not the eldest, not the best connected. A young man in his late 20s whom almost nobody outside the palace had heard of: Mohammed bin Salman. What the Emiratis saw in him was a mirror: ambition without patience, an appetite for risk, a conviction that the old, slow, cautious Gulf was doomed in a post-oil world. So the Wuwei went to work. Its diplomats lobbied Washington on the young prince's behalf. Its networks vouched for him, with Western governments and investors. Its rulers hyped him in every room that mattered, building, piece by piece, the international credibility that a seventh son could never have built alone. It worked beyond anyone's expectations. Within months, the young prince was defense minister at 29. Months after that, deputy crown prince, positioned directly on the path to absolute power, with Emirati fingerprints all over the ladder he climbed. The Way had pulled off something extraordinary. It had helped install, inside its giant neighbor, a leadership that thought like Abu Dhabi, moved like Abu Dhabi, and, crucially, listened to Abu Dhabi. A 24-year age gap separated the Emirati ruler from his Saudi pratka, and by every account the relationship worked exactly as designed: the veteran and the apprentice, the strategist and the executor. And for a few years, the returns on this investment were spectacular. Saudi Arabia, a sleeping giant that had spent generations avoiding risk, governed by committees of cautious elders, suddenly transformed into something the region had never seen: an aggressive, fast-moving, revisionist power. Together, the two countries stormed into Yemen. Together, they blockaded Qatar. Together, they redrew the rules of the Gulf. The kingdom even declared Iran's supreme leader the new Hitler, language no Saudi ruler had ever dared use. The giant was finally awake, and it was marching in step with the small neighbor that had helped wake it. But buried inside this triumph was a flaw so obvious that, in hindsight, it's astonishing nobody in Abu Dhabi seems to have weighed it properly. The entire strategy depended on one assumption: that the giant, once awakened, would keep marching in the direction the Wu pointed. That a kingdom with 20 times the population, 6 times the economy of its mentor, and custody of Islam's holiest cities would permanently accept the role of junior partner in its own neighborhood. Giants do not stay apprentices. The OA had not created a follower. It had created a competitor, one with every ambition Abu Dhabi had, every playbook Abu Dhabi used, and resources Abu Dhabi could never match. The mentor had trained the apprentice in everything: how to project power, how to crush rivals, how to build a future beyond oil. The one lesson it could not control was the final one. The moment the apprentice looked around the region and asked the obvious question, "Why should any of this belong to you and not to me?" That question would take years to surface. And when it finally did, it surfaced in the worst possible place, a war zone both countries were trapped in together, where their hidden differences would stop being philosophical and start being measured in blood. Every broken alliance has a place where the breaking started. For Saudi Arabia and the Wu, that place is Yemen, the poorest country in the Arab world, and the war that was supposed to prove their partnership worked. Instead, it revealed a truth both capitals had managed to hide even from themselves. They had entered the same war for 2 completely different reasons, and only one of them was going to pay the price. On paper, the mission in 2015 was simple. An Iranian-backed movement, the Houthis, had seized Yemen's capital and toppled the internationally recognized government. For Riyadh, this was the nightmare scenario made real. An ally of Iran, armed with missiles, sitting directly on its longest and most porous border. So Saudi Arabia assembled a coalition, brought in its Emirati partner, and launched a campaign that was supposed to last weeks. It lasted years. And as the war ground on, the 2 allies quietly discovered that geography had given them opposite stakes. Saudi Arabia shares over 1,000 kilometers of border with Yemen. Its cities, airports, and oil facilities sit within range of Houthi drones and missiles. The Wu shares no border with Yemen at all. Its territory was attacked rarely. Saudi territory, constantly. Year after year, Houthi projectiles slammed into Saudi soil, the first sustained attacks on the kingdom's territory by a foreign force since the Gulf War of 1991. Saudi Arabia was fighting for its physical security. The Wu, it slowly became clear, was fighting for something else entirely. Because while Saudi jets bled money and reputation bombing the mountains of the north, Emirati forces concentrated on the south. The coasts, the ports, the islands. And there, Abu Dhabi did something quietly brilliant and quietly disloyal at the same time. It began building its own network of local forces, separate from the coalition's official goals. Chief among them was a movement with a dream, the resurrection of South Yemen, the independent state that had existed until 1990. The Southern Transitional Council, the STC. On paper, the coalition existed to reunify Yemen under one government. The Way was now funding, arming, and training a faction whose entire purpose was to cut Yemen in 2. Why? Look at what the South is. It's the Port of Aden, one of the great natural harbors of the world. It's the coastline commanding the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, the choke point through which a huge share of global shipping and energy must pass to reach the Suez Canal. For a small country building an empire of ports and logistics across the region, a friendly, dependent mini-state sitting on one of the planet's most strategic waterways was worth infinitely more than a unified Yemen ever could be. The Saudis needed Yemen whole and stable. The Emiratis needed Yemen's most valuable piece, detached, grateful, and under their influence. Meanwhile, the costs of the war landed almost entirely on one partner. It was Saudi Arabia's name on the coalition, so it was Saudi Arabia that absorbed the world's fury as the humanitarian catastrophe deepened. Hundreds of thousands dead, famine, cholera, images that turned Western parliaments and newspapers against Riyadh. It was Saudi weapons purchases that Washington froze in 2021 when the political price grew too high. And it was Saudi cities that kept burning. In 2022, Houthi missiles struck an oil depot in Jeddah, sending a column of black smoke over the circuit where the Formula One Grand Prix was racing at that very moment. A plume visible to every driver, every camera, every investor the kingdom was desperately trying to attract. The message to global capital could not have been clearer. This country is not safe. And that message struck at something deeper than pride. Saudi Arabia's entire future, its plan to survive after oil, depends on convincing the world's money to move there. Nobody builds resorts, airlines, and financial centers inside a missile range. Slowly, painfully, Riyadh understood that the war it could not win was also strangling the future it could not postpone. So it changed course entirely, stopped the airstrikes, opened talks, accepted that the Houthis would remain, and began pushing every faction toward a unity government. Whatever it took to make the rockets stop. But when Saudi negotiators looked at the map to piece Yemen back together, they found their own allies' project standing in the way. A separatist statelet, armed and funded by Abu Dhabi, controlling the ports, refusing reunification. The single largest obstacle to the stability Saudi Arabia now needed like oxygen. The UAE had walked out of the war with everything it wanted. Saudi Arabia had walked out holding the bill, the blame, and the border. One partner's victory had been purchased, quietly, with the other partner's defeat. Riyadh never said this out loud. But it never forgot it either. And as the 2020s unfolded, the kingdom began to notice a disturbing pattern. What the UAE had done in Yemen, it was doing everywhere. Once you know what to look for, you start seeing it everywhere. That's what happened to Saudi Arabia in the early 2020s. After Yemen, Riyadh began looking at the region through new eyes, and everywhere it looked, it found the same pattern repeating. Wherever a country was cracking apart, its closest allies seemed to be standing next to the crack, holding a chisel. Start with Sudan. In 2023, the third largest country in Africa collapsed into civil war. The National Army on one side, a paramilitary force called the RUSF on the other. For Saudi Arabia, the stakes were immediate and physical. Sudan sits directly across the Red Sea, the waterway on which the kingdom is building its entire coastal future. Riyadh backed the army, the institution, the state, the recognized government, and positioned itself as peacemaker, hosting negotiation rounds in Jeddah. The UAE made the opposite bet. It was widely accused of arming and financing the RISF, the same force whose fighters would go on to commit massacres that the United States government itself formally labeled a genocide, with entire cities in Darfur emptied of their populations in a matter of days. Abu Dhabi denied everything. But investigators kept tracing the weapons, and the money kept flowing. Much of it through the gold trade, billions of dollars of Sudanese gold moving through Dubai's markets while Sudan burned. One ally was trying to hold the state together. The other was profiting from the force tearing it apart. Then look across the water at the Horn of Africa. Somalia, a country fighting for decades to rebuild itself, has a breakaway region in its north, Somaliland, that declared independence long ago but was never recognized by a single nation on earth. The UAE moved in anyway, building a port there, training local forces, accepting Somaliland passports, recognition in everything but name. Saudi Arabia backed the government in Mogadishu, the recognized state, the official map. The same split replayed in Libya, the way backed a rebel general waging war on the recognized government. In Syria, after the old regime fell, Saudi Arabia pledged billions to rebuild the new state. The way held back, skeptical, and gravitated instead toward a separatist faction rising in the south. Yemen, Sudan, Somalia, Libya, Syria, 5 broken countries, and the same 2 signatures on every fracture line, just on opposite sides. This was no longer coincidence. It was doctrine, and the 2 doctrines could not coexist. Saudi Arabia's doctrine had become, in a word, stability, not out of idealism, out of necessity. The kingdom's survival plan requires a decade of calm borders, calm seas, calm headlines, so that trillions in foreign capital feel safe flowing into its mega projects. So, the Saudis went on a reconciliation spree that would have been unthinkable years earlier. They ended the blockade of Qatar, walking away with none of their demands met. They restored relations with Iran, their existential enemy, in a deal brokered by China. They repaired ties with Turkey. They stopped bombing the Houthis and started paying Yemeni salaries instead. The kingdom that had spent the 2010s setting fires was now desperately buying extinguishers, even making peace with arsonists, as long as the burning stopped. The UAE's doctrine was the mirror opposite. Abu Dhabi had never paid a real price for the aggressive playbook of the 2010s. Its economy was already diversified, its cities already safe, its reputation already laundered through skylines and airlines. So it simply kept going. Where states were weak, it didn't see risk, it saw inventory. A coastline here, a port there, a pliable militia holding a strategic island. Each acquisition another node in a maritime empire stretching from the Gulf to the Red Sea to the Horn of Africa. Central governments demand negotiations, impose conditions, answer to populations. Separatists in need of a patron ask far fewer questions. The Way had discovered that it was cheaper to influence fragments than to influence states. And so, wherever the map was cracking, it invested in the cracks. And there was an ideological engine underneath it all. Abu Dhabi remained obsessed with its oldest fear, political Islam, and would back nearly anyone against any government that contained Islamists, even governments its Saudi ally was funding. Riyadh, meanwhile, had made peace with working alongside its ideological enemies if that's what stability required. The Saudis were now pragmatists surrounded by fires. The Emiratis were still crusaders with a real estate strategy. By the middle of the decade, the conclusion inside the Saudi royal court had hardened into something close to official doctrine. The greatest source of chaos in the region was no longer Iran. It was the small, brilliant, relentless ally next door. But geopolitics alone doesn't explain the venom of what came next. Because at the exact same moment, the 2 countries collided over something far more personal than Yemen or Sudan. Money, specifically, the discovery that their 2 visions of the future were, economically speaking, the same vision. And there wasn't room for both. Here is the number that explains everything that's about to happen: 45%. Nearly half of Saudi Arabia's economy still depends on selling oil. And every serious forecast, every energy transition model, every electric car rolling off an assembly line says the same thing to Riyadh. The clock is running. A country of 20 million citizens, built on a single commodity, staring at the end of that commodity's century. For Saudi Arabia, diversification is not a policy preference. It is survival math. And so the kingdom drew up the most ambitious economic transformation ever attempted. A plan to become, within a single generation, everything it had never been: a tourism paradise, a global financial hub, an aviation superpower, a technology center. Futuristic cities rising from the desert, a new national airline, resorts along the Red Sea. Trillions of dollars of ambition compressed into a single decade. There was just one problem. Every single item on that list already had an owner. The Middle East already had a tourism paradise, a financial hub, an aviation superpower, one country that had spent 40 years building exactly that portfolio. Precisely because it, too, had once looked at its oil reserves and seen an expiration date. Saudi Arabia's blueprint for the future was not an empty map. It was a map of the United Arab Emirates. Think about what this means from Abu Dhabi's side of the table. The UAE's escape from oil is not theoretical. It's done. Only about a quarter of its economy still comes from crude. The rest is the machine. Dubai's airports funneling the traffic between Europe and Asia, its towers filled with the regional headquarters of the world's corporations, its ports handling the region's trade, its beaches and malls absorbing the region's tourists. That machine is the country. And now, the giant next door. 6 times the economy, 20 times the citizens, and effectively unlimited capital, had announced, politely and without ever saying the words, that it intended to build the same machine. Bigger, the attacks came dressed as economic policy. In 2022, Riyadh announced that companies wanting Saudi government contracts, access to the largest pool of spending in the region, would need to move their regional headquarters into Saudi Arabia. No name was mentioned. No name needed to be. For decades, regional headquarters had meant one address: Dubai. Then came a new Saudi national airline, built explicitly to challenge the Gulf carriers that dominate intercontinental routes, carriers whose home base is Emirati soil. New Saudi ports and logistics corridors on the Red Sea, designed to route global trade around the choke points the way controls. Sector by sector, the kingdom wasn't inventing an economy, it was besieging one. And if you want to know why Abu Dhabi reacted with something close to existential dread, you need to know about a country most people never think about: Bahrain. Because the way has seen this movie before. It was the star. For most of the 20th century, the economic capital of the Gulf was not Dubai. It was Bahrain, a small island kingdom that found oil first in the early 1930s, realized early that its reserves were modest, and did everything right. It diversified. It built the region's banking sector, its trade links, its tourism. By the 1970s, Bahrain was the undisputed financial center of the Gulf. Decades of dominance, an entire national identity built on being the indispensable hub. Then, starting in the 1990s, a richer, hungrier neighbor came for that crown. The UAE built financial centers with looser rules and deeper pockets. It built islands in the sea, the tallest tower on earth, hotels that became global legends, spectacle as strategy, headlines as infrastructure. Within roughly a decade, everything Bahrain had spent half a century building had been absorbed, replicated, and surpassed. Bahrain didn't collapse. It simply stopped mattering. It became a footnote in an economy it once led. The way knows exactly how hubs die because it killed one. It knows the playbook by heart because it wrote it. And now it watches Saudi Arabia running that same playbook, page by page, against Dubai and Abu Dhabi. The deeper pockets, the looser incentives, the mega projects engineered for headlines, the patient siege of every industry that matters. The mentor is being hunted with its own weapons, and this time, it's the one playing the role of Bahrain. That is what makes this rivalry so much more dangerous than an ordinary trade dispute. Two countries can share a battlefield and still reconcile. Enemies become partners all the time. But these two need the same investors, the same corporate headquarters, the same tourists, the same flight routes, the same future. Regional markets almost certainly cannot support both visions at full scale. One of them will be the hub of the post-oil Middle East. The other will be Bahrain. And just as this economic collision was locking into place, both countries identified the ultimate prize. The one asset that could decide not only who wins the economic war, but who gets something even more valuable: a superpower's guarantee of protection. That prize is artificial intelligence, and the race for it would drag both countries into the strangest corner of this entire story. One that runs directly through Washington. There is a country whose entire national security rests on a single, brilliant insight. If you make yourself indispensable to America's most important industry, America has no choice but to protect you. That country is Taiwan. Its factories produce the advanced semiconductors that the entire digital world runs on. And that dependency, more than any treaty, is why Washington treats the island's defense as a vital interest. In the Gulf, both Saudi Arabia and the UAE studied that model. Both reached the same conclusion, and both decided to replicate it with artificial intelligence. The logic is cold and identical on both sides. American security guarantees in the Middle East feel weaker every year. Administrations pivot to Asia, commitments waver, allies get attacked, and wait days for a phone call. But if your territory hosts the data centers, the chips, and the computing power that America's AI industry cannot function without, you are no longer a client asking for protection. You are infrastructure. Nobody abandons infrastructure. And so, since 2024, both countries have poured tens of billions of dollars into the same race. Massive data center clusters, sovereign AI funds, partnerships with every major American technology firm, each trying to lock in the position Taiwan holds in Silicon, but for the age of intelligence. The problem, once again, it is the same position. There is room for one indispensable AI hub in the region. Both are building it. And in this race, the UAE played a card that stunned even seasoned observers. Days before the new American president's inauguration in January 2026, the Emirati government quietly purchased a large stake in a struggling cryptocurrency company, a firm with no active products, whose defining feature was its owner, the incoming president's own family. Roughly $500 million, a significant slice of which flowed directly to entities under that family's personal control. It was the first time in American history that a foreign government bought a major ownership stake in an incoming president's business. And then, just months later, the new administration approved something the American intelligence community had long resisted: the export of 500,000 of the most advanced AI chips on Earth to the UAE, the hardware for one of the largest AI complexes ever built. Officially, the two events are unrelated. You are free to draw your own conclusions. Riyadh certainly drew its own and understood that its rival was willing to purchase influence at the very top of the American government by any means available. But money and chips are only half of what divides these two countries. The other half is older, deeper, and cuts to the very core of what each nation is. Israel. For decades, the entire Arab world held a single, unified position: no recognition of Israel without a state for the Palestinians. It was the one line nobody crossed. Then, in 2020, the way crossed it, alone, suddenly, and completely. Full diplomatic relations, embassies, direct flights, and within a couple of years something far beyond diplomacy: joint naval exercises, intelligence sharing, surveillance cooperation, trade exploding past $3 billion a year. Not recognition. Alliance. And here is where the deepest asymmetry between the two countries becomes visible, the one that no summit can negotiate away. The UAE could make that leap because of what it is, a nation where roughly 90% of residents are foreigners, with only about 1 million citizens whose opinions its rulers must actually manage. Saudi Arabia is the opposite creature entirely. 20 million citizens, many deeply conservative, and, above everything, custody of Mecca and Medina, the two holiest places in Islam. The Saudi throne doesn't answer only to its own street. It answers, symbolically, to nearly 2 billion Muslims worldwide. After Gaza, after the destruction and death that a Saudi population watched live on their phones, recognition of Israel stopped being a diplomatic option in Riyadh and became something closer to regime suicide. Polling made it brutal and simple. Support among Saudis for ties with Israel collapsed to the teens, while nearly all of them demanded the opposite. No ruler survives defying a number like that on an issue like this. So the two allies ended up wired into opposing circuits. The UAE bound itself to Israel, a partnership of intelligence, technology, and increasingly shared clients among the region's separatists. Saudi Arabia found itself pushed toward the other pole, mutual defense with Pakistan, a nuclear-armed state, deepening ties with Turkey, alignment with Qatar and Egypt. Two webs, spreading outward from two capitals that once acted as one. All the pieces were now in place. The economic collision, the AI race, the Israel divide, the proxy wars from Sudan to Somalia. All that was missing was a spark. A single event that would drag this cold, hidden rivalry into the open, in front of the entire world. That spark came in December 2025 in a port city on the Yemeni coast. And what happened there in 10 days ended a decade of pretending. In the first days of December 2025, the separatist militia that the UAE had spent a decade building in southern Yemen suddenly moved, not gradually, all at once. In a lightning offensive, its forces swept across the south and east of the country, seizing province after province, overrunning positions held by Saudi-backed government forces. Within weeks, they controlled virtually all the territory of the old South Yemen, including regions holding the overwhelming majority of the country's oil, with their reach extending all the way to the Saudi border itself. And then they said the words out loud. A formal declaration of independence was coming. The map of the Arabian Peninsula was about to be redrawn by a militia armed by Saudi Arabia's closest ally, standing on Saudi Arabia's doorstep. For Riyadh, the timing removed any possible doubt about who had approved this. The offensive rolled forward while Gulf leaders were gathered at their own annual summit, smiling for the cameras as an Emirati-backed force devoured the neighborhood. Every red line the kingdom had drawn was now behind enemy position, and so, on December 30th, Saudi Arabia did the unthinkable. Its warplanes struck the port of Mokalla and destroyed a shipment of armored vehicles and weapons bound for the separatists. Emirati cargo, hit deliberately, publicly, by Saudi bombs. Even during the worst crises the Gulf had ever endured, no member had ever bombed the assets of another. Riyadh followed the strike with something almost as unprecedented, an open, public accusation that its own allies' behavior was, in its words, highly dangerous, a threat to the kingdom's national security. What followed was less a battle than a demolition. Saudi air power backed a counteroffensive that rolled the separatists back with stunning speed. Position after position fell, and on January 9, 2026, barely 10 days after the first Saudi bomb fell, the Southern Transitional Council formally dissolved itself. A decade of Emirati investment, billions of dollars, An entire shadow state on the world's most strategic waterway, erased in a week and a half. Its leadership fled to Abu Dhabi. The UAE withdrew its military presence from Yemen entirely. The apprentice had not merely defied the mentor. It had humiliated him in front of the entire region. And then, the war changed weapons. In late April, the UAE announced it was leaving OPEC, walking out of the oil cartel that Saudi Arabia has led for half a century. A public declaration that Abu Dhabi would no longer coordinate its most important industry with Riyadh. By May, something stranger began happening, quietly, in the plumbing of both economies. Bank transfers from Saudi Arabia to Emirati accounts started vanishing, held for days, reversed, returned without explanation. Businesses began routing payments through third countries. People began flying between the two richest nations in the Arab world, carrying bags of physical cash. At the land border, trucks began waiting not hours but days, then over a week, drivers sleeping under their trailers, cargo rotting, no reason ever given. Visas quietly rejected. $20 billion a year in trade, slowly being squeezed by two governments that still, officially, call each other brothers. This is what a 21st century war between allies looks like. No declarations, no missiles exchanged, just money that stops moving and trucks that stop crossing. Around this silent war, two rival architectures are now hardening. On one side, Saudi Arabia, bound by a mutual defense pact to nuclear-armed Pakistan, with Turkey in talks to join what some analysts already call an Islamic NATO, alongside Qatar and Egypt, defending recognized borders and central governments. On the other, the UAE and Israel, joined by the states of the Abraham Accords and partners further afield, backing the separatists and breakaway republics from Yemen to Somalia to Syria. Between them lies a belt of broken countries where the two blocs now compete over every port, every militia, every fracture line. The old Middle East was organized around one question: which side of the Iran divide are you on? The next Middle East is being organized around a different question entirely, and most of the world hasn't noticed the question changed. Even the war with Iran, which briefly forced the two rivals back into a show of unity as missiles flew over the Gulf, changed nothing underneath. The moment the intensity faded, the payments froze again, the trucks stopped again, the rivalry resumed. Because this conflict was never about a mood or a misunderstanding. It is structural. Two nations built by the same fears, trained in the same methods, chasing the same singular future, in a region that can only crown one hub, one indispensable partner, one center of the post-oil world. The truck driver at the border eventually got through, or turned back. His story dissolves into the thousands like it. But the line of trucks behind him keeps growing. Because the two countries on either side of that crossing have discovered the oldest truth in geopolitics. The one that no alliance, however golden, has ever escaped. Nations do not have permanent friends. They have permanent interests. For one decade, fear made their interests identical. Now, ambition has made them opposites. The alliance that built the modern Gulf is gone. What replaces it will decide the next decade of the Middle East, quietly, ruthlessly, and largely out of sight. No agenda, just the signal.